Well, good morning or good afternoon, folks, whatever the case may be. If you're on the East Coast, it's obviously afternoon. Out here on the lovely kind of rainy Pacific, it is about 10 o'clock in the morning. I just want to welcome everybody to today's webinar, Fighting Differentiation in a Commoditized Industry, How to Stand Out Within a Competitive Market. This is a special webinar today between Dexter and Cheney and FMI. I am Andy Holtman with Dexter and Cheney. And in just a few moments, I'll turn things over to Jay Snyder with FMI. But as folks are still kind of trickling in this morning, I just want to take a few seconds and go over a few housekeeping tips, just in case this is your first time using the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar panel. If this is your first time, you might see a little navigation bar there on the right-hand side of your screen. This is how you interact with us during the webinar today. There usually is indicated by a little orange arrow there. You can expand or hide that navigation bar to your liking. But you also want a number of different options there where you can adjust settings, interact with us, and more. One thing you might notice today is that if you're on the webinar, you are muted. We do mute folks so that everybody is able to hear the presentation. There's no background noise, things of that nature. We do have a questions and comment area, though, so you can still interact with us, ask questions, make comments at any point during the webinar by just typing in your questions there, and we will see that on the back end. If you do have a question during the webinar today, we will do our very best to try to address that question on the webinar. But if for whatever reason we're unable to get to your question, we do follow up with folks after the webinar as well. We are also recording this webinar today, so if you would like a copy of the recorded version and or the slides from this presentation today after the webinar, just let us know and we'll do our very best to make sure you get those quickly and promptly after the webinar. Just a couple words about Dexter and Cheney for anybody that might not know. We are a construction software company specializing in business management and operations solutions. We began way back in 1981, being the first company really to bring accounting software to the construction industry. So we've been around for more than 35 years now. Today we are the leader in cloud-based construction ERP software. Our Spectrum construction software is a full suite accounting, business management, project management, equipment management, and service management solution. And we are in the cloud, so you can access our software wherever work takes you. But another thing that we do is we also partner with a number of different industry associations and organizations like FMI to bring a host of educational resources to the industry. Now, these include webinars like you're on today, white papers, videos, blogs, podcasts, and a whole lot more. You can find these by visiting our website at www.dextercheney.com. With all the housekeeping stuff out of the way, I want to welcome Jay Snyder. Jay is a senior consultant with FMI. He has an extensive background in the engineering and construction industries on both the operations and ownership side of the table. And Jay today is going to share with us some of the key tips to really set your company apart from the competition and give it distinct advantages in the marketplace that will ultimately, hopefully, win you more work. Well, Jay, with that out of the way, let me turn things over to you, sir, and let you take the reins.
Thanks, Andy. And hi, everyone. Thank you for attending today. I'm really pleased to spend some time with each of you today. At the end of the presentation, there's going to be a few slides about me and about FMI. And please accept this invitation to connect further by, sending me an email or giving me a call or visiting our website. FMI has been the leading management consulting and investment banking firm to the construction industry for over 60 years. This is quite a big topic to cover in a webinar, so I'd like to talk about it in a way that gets you thinking more about your business and looking into how your company has strategically positioned themselves, attempted to develop differentiators, sought operational excellence as a competitive advantage, and considered client relationships in the project acquisition process. So our agenda today includes understanding what a commoditized industry is, assessing the company-defined differentiation, thinking of client relationships as a competitive advantage, and then at the end there will be time for some questions, comments, and I'll try to provide some insightful answers. Well, let's take a minute to get on the same page with what a commoditized industry is. So we all know what a commodity is, I assume, but rather than assume, let's look at a commodity and try to have a common definition. So it's a good or service that can be marketed to satisfy a want or a need. And in particular, commodities are usually raw materials or some sort of primary good in the product life cycle. So we think of things like copper, coffee, water, and even time is a commodity that's often forgotten about. That doesn't necessarily line up as well as a root word with what we mean in business when we talk about a commoditized market, except for maybe in just a few ways. Industry needs commodities to be able to provide that refined and final good or service. And this is similar to how your clients need your construction services in order for them to bring to market their goods and services. In some ways, more directly than others. And also with commodities, the purchaser of those commodities isn't necessarily concerned about anything other than price, as long as that commodity meets a basic set of specifications. And I know that you all can relate to this in the construction industry. Usually those specifications are industry accepted standards, much like specifications in the construction industry. So here again we have all experienced construction services treated much like a commodity, where the decision is based usually on price, assuming all firms can meet the specification. So because of this, companies that operate in commoditized markets and commoditized industries really struggle with differentiating themselves from their competitors. Companies have a difficult time developing strategies that include corporate drivers and a vision that sets them on a clear path that separates themselves from the pack. It's a situation, as I said, where the customer measures value in terms of price, perhaps rather than in terms of better project outcomes and positive impacts to their business. And what I mean by that, as an example, is if they were to measure value in terms of, say, a reduction in effort on their part on the project, working with the team to achieve the end result. In commoditized industries, there are very low barriers to entry. Competitors can easily enter these types of markets, and new companies can usually be awarded contracts fairly easily, oftentimes being a numbers game. Just bid on a bunch of work, and eventually you'll get some contracts. So it's just as easy in commoditized markets, just as easy as it is to enter these markets, it's easy to exit these markets as well. And I think that we all experience this in the construction industry. A very easy way to identify commoditized markets and industries is when you have difficulty identifying proprietary products, processes protected by trade secrets, or even patented intellectual property. So we're all familiar with these types of commoditized industries here that I'm showing on this slide. We buy their goods and services every day, and usually we buy those goods or services based on price. Usually these are also industries and markets where we're very price sensitive. And what I mean there is that we're sensitive when the price has small fluctuations or when there's a new pricing model introduced. So take, for instance, the airline industry and how we've all reacted to baggage fees or the introduction of economy comfort seating as a way to get more leg room or get the same leg room, but have to pay more to get it. Or consider like cable and internet services like Time Warner, DirecTV, Dish Network, some of the other ones. I mean, they all carry the same channels. They all struggle with customer service and customer satisfaction, and they're all priced about the same. And most of us switch back and forth, I shouldn't say most, maybe many of us switch back and forth among them to take advantage of new account promotional offers. So we value the service based on price. And then think about things like office supplies. It might be that you always go to the same place, but that may be more out of pure convenience. The office supply store closest to your office, which is not at all related to quality of the good or the service that may be provided by a Staples or an Office Max or some sort of office supply company. The prices across these stores are pretty much the same, which means that you don't really care which one you use, just whatever's the closest. And sometimes insurance agents, though, are exceptional, but most times we're buying insurance based on the cheapest premiums, assuming similar coverage. So if you consider how Progressive's commercials actually encourage you to choose based on price, and in fact, they give you the ability to compare their prices right on their website. Of course, others try to market their agency as a customer-focused firm, but let me ask you this. How effective do you think their ad and marketing campaign would be if their rates had to rise 5 or 10%? I would imagine that a lot of their clients would seek another agent to provide them with insurance services. When you need to stop for gas, you probably don't seek out a BP or an Exxon or a racetrack. Of course, there are exceptions, like the BP boycotts that followed that Deepwater Horizon disaster. And although you know gas stations that are typically the cheapest to buy, and you will go there, if you're away from that gas station, you may not even worry about the price so much because you know that generally speaking, they're all priced the same. There's virtually no customer loyalty when it comes to convenience stores and gas stations. And why is that? Well, it's because all of these industries we've been talking about are commodity businesses. And I'm sure you can think of some others on your own. Don't get me wrong. There are always exceptions to the rule. Okay, so let's continue on here by talking about your company now that we all have a general understanding for how we want to define a commoditized industry and a commoditized market. As you look at differentiation, realizing it's also called competitive advantage, you can't simply look at one facet of the business. For example, you can't simply look at operations and how you conduct work. That's because a change in operations will almost certainly affect your sales team and how they articulate your company's values. It will affect the company functions and support operations, which also feed into the company's strategy. So first things first is make sure you really understand your business. And I know what probably most of you are going to say. You're going to say something like, Jay, I run this business every day. I've been doing it for years. I know my business. And my response would be exactly. Sometimes we end up doing such a good job executing the business of the business that we forget to look up over the weeds and remember our goals and objectives for the company. We forget to ensure that we're targeting the clients that are right for us and evaluate how we're doing in our market. So I'm just trying to make a point here that if you are evaluating how the company can be noteworthy and special in the industry, you need to take a step or two back to be able to do this. You should have a deliberate conversation about the company. You should recognize that the company has a strategic business plan, whether it's written or it's in your brain. You should acknowledge that business development is key to your work acquisition and to articulating the company's differentiators. And you should realize that operations and operational excellence allow you to realize considerable market gain, margin gain, and stand out from the pack. And then you can take that margin gain and you can invest in the company to develop further competitive advantage. Okay, so let's take a slightly deeper look at each of these. We'll start by understanding the company, its strategy, and your market. Sometimes companies will jump right into brainstorming about a new idea, process, or technology that they want to bring on board to be different. These companies will start talking about how to market it to clients, and they might even, before they even know where they're going, they might even start incorporating it into the business. But you guys are going to tell me that you're going to do better than that. You're going to do some self-reflection as a company to make sure that you understand yourselves, your market, and how you conduct business. So why is it important to know where you make money and to know where you work? Well, because you want to assess each of these areas to see if they can dictate to you where you perform well and where you don't perform well. It may also scream out at you the need that the market may have that's underserved in a particular area. And if you can find that underserved need and build a process or a service offering around that, well, you found an opportunity to differentiate. So understanding your market and the type of work, your customer demographics, your internal and external resources will help you to constrain yourselves to not consider every possible bright and shiny opportunity, but to create competitive advantage and differentiation in areas that are relevant to your company and relevant to your customers and within the market you serve. So consider these questions. When considering what market segments do you perform well in, this could be answered geographically or by construction sector, or more effectively, it could be answered with both of these in mind. Consider your existing customers and look at where your best margins are. Is there an opportunity to focus on these clients, or can you find new clients that have similar values, needs, and profiles as your current clients, and thereby being an expert builder in that segment? How well do you know your clients? Are you in tune with their future needs? Do you know how they conduct their business? We'll talk about that a bit more towards the end of the presentation. Are there parts of your project delivery process that you would identify as unique? Possibly a process or procedure that positively impacts project success, which could be considered a trade secret. How do you exploit that? How do you market that? How do you build on that to really create a competitive advantage in your space and differentiate yourself? Is there an opportunity to secure more work that aligns with those processes or skills? Can you refine your current processes or skills to be slightly different than your competitors in a way that your clients are seeking or needing or will value, or maybe even to serve different clients? So these are all things that you need to consider as you're understanding your business. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about strategy specifically today, but I do want you to realize that there are considerations to make so that there's alignment throughout the company. So as you determine where and how to shift the company, there needs to be thoughtful consideration for how to go to market with a new approach. How does it feed into your current value propositions? What changes should be considered there? We'll talk about value propositions a little bit more later too. How will this differentiator position you in your market? And what objectives should you state to measure the success of your effort? What sort of growth are you expecting from it? Is it to retain clients or to attract new ones? Will it allow you to break into new markets? And what's required internally to ensure we deliver on this promise to ourselves? So I just touched on value propositions, but be sure to remember that your current value proposition should be a statement of value to your customer, one which the customer finds valuable in your delivery of goods or services. In the construction industry, being the low-cost leader is often how you win work through bidding. However, being a low-cost leader is not a differentiator. Please remember this. When the company is identified with being a low-cost leader and has no other value proposition, you can't build profitability to reinvest in your company and further develop your competitive advantage, and thereby bring more value to your clients. This situation of always striving to be the lowest price is often referred to as the race to the bottom. And generally speaking, in our industry, when you race to be the lowest bidder, you're also racing to be the company with the lowest margin, and you're eventually the company with the lowest growth. So there are many exceptions to this example for sectors where they value precision or speed to market much more than low cost. You may or may not operate in those markets. These are opportunities to develop expertise and a track record of performance. Be careful, though, not to pursue differentiators that conflict with your current value propositions unless you're doing it deliberately, unless it makes sense to restate and reevaluate those value propositions. Otherwise, it'll cause your marketing and branding to be really confusing to your customers and to the market in general. And your new whiz-bang differentiator, well, it might be seen as a marketing ploy rather than a genuine value and advantage to the client. I want to make sure that we all don't fool ourselves, though, okay? On this slide, you can see some typical differentiators, such as, and I'm using air quotes here, excellent service and having the best people. Many companies would choose at least one of these as their potential differentiator. But let me ask you this. If most of your competitors are striving to achieve the same thing, does that really mean it's a differentiator? Because I don't think it is. And really, by definition, it would not be a differentiator if everyone's trying to achieve and does achieve those same things. So you need to give this some thought. Most of the high-performing firms spend a lot of time identifying and developing their differentiators. If they can identify significant differentiators, then they invest in the company to create them. This is what makes the market so difficult. Most firms are saying the same things to the client, like we're stating here. We provide excellent service during and after construction. We have a history of meeting difficult schedules. We have a very strong team for your project. We have the best people. Well, that's really not going to differentiate yourself from the competitors because everyone's saying the same thing, whether they deliver on it or not. Whatever you decide to do to pursue or exploit your differentiators, you also need to consider how you will bring the message to the market. Who's going to represent this to the client? Are those people capable sales professionals, or is it being done through operations staff? You're going to need folks informed and able to push it forward. You need to take some time. You need to understand if people in your organization are natural salespeople. And sometimes we assume that the project team is our strongest sales force because they're always in front of the client. They are a client-facing resource at all times. But you might be better off with a more formal selling strategy, including business development and sales professionals that can establish a consistent brand, marketing message, and a set of values in your market. We've talked a lot about understanding your business by addressing strategy and business development. So I think it's time we transition into operations by talking about operational efficiency. Operational efficiency involves improving processes or more effectively utilizing resources to cut your cost of production without affecting your quality. Operational efficiency on its own can lead to developing differentiation in a company. Okay, I'll say that again. Operational efficiency on its own, if done well, could lead to developing differentiation for your company. If nothing else, it's going to allow the company to realize higher margins by lowering expenses, doing things more efficiently, so that investment can be made to develop those differentiators. The next two slides state some typical myths and facts about optimizing operations. Actually, these are really all more myths. These are some very simple ways to assess your operational performance. So when it comes to operational excellence, there's a lot of naysayers and even more folks that are convinced that they're already doing as good as they can as a company. But the fact is that we found in our research that these are common myths, and they hold companies back from pursuing improvements that allow them to reach operational excellence. So I would say, just take a moment here and read through these, and then think about whether you would have made the same statement and whether or not you're convinced that that's a fact or a myth. Okay. So we're talking about indicators of operational efficiency. If you have access to industry best-in-class data, you can compare your statistics to those of your peers or to an industry and an accepted benchmark. Internally, you can calculate the difference between your actual and estimated labor hours on activities, for example, to determine how well you're planning, managing, and pricing your work. Most of us will compare actual and estimated margins, but I'd say, dig deeper and keep asking why as you dig deeper into the numbers to find out, what's causing the difference. So let's talk about this metric of percent projects over and under labor estimate. This is the type of thing that really affects profit, gain, or fade on a project. It can be a great gauge of how well the company understands the work that they're executing. Our planning factors such as pricing and commodity indexes and scheduling, are they outdated? Do you need more input from the field staff and technicians to plan the work? And maybe as the market we work in becoming more complex, or has there been a shift in means and methods or project expectations? So it's a great idea to keep asking why as you move through each of these questions to go down the road of figuring out how to achieve operational excellence. And in order to reduce your costs, you have to know your costs. So you need to understand each of your unit costs. Don't rely on industry pricing tables or historical company information as your primary source of info. Be careful using previous projects as a baseline for pricing future work. We know that every project's a little different, and labor and material prices fluctuate. You can start asking your team about productivity, understanding their routines and their processes, review standardized processes to find opportunities to reduce complexity or redundancy in your processes. This will give you an indication of where improvement areas are. It'll encourage your managers to think the same way and ask similar questions, creating this culture of operational excellence. And again, why do we care about operational excellence? Because operational excellence alone could lead to significant differentiation as a company. If you are doing your work extremely well, not only does it cut your cost of construction, which makes you more competitive, and actually what you should be focused on is converting that into higher margin, not necessarily to be more competitive in a lower price, but to have higher margin at your same prices. But it also shows your clients that you have adopted and are implementing best practices in the industry. And maybe in some ways you're leading the industry in some of those practices. Productivity is most impacted by good planning and management. And we're talking about productivity because productivity is really the backbone for good operational excellence or achieving operational excellence. There are a lot of tools at a manager's disposal to increase productivity. And it'd be interesting to know how well your management team understands those different tools and techniques, and whether or not they're pulling all the right levers in the right way to enable a productive crew. Now, keep in mind that these levers that are available may include how we assign people to teams to create a high-performing team that maybe holds all the skills that's needed for a project. There may be an opportunity to reduce travel time to get more productivity in the field. Another lever available is perhaps prefabrication, depending on what type of work you self-perform and what services you offer. Can you prefabricate more of your work and take advantage of working in an environment that you control? How are you leveraging technology to reduce that burden and improve field productivity? Is it cumbersome for your crews to do simple things like submit expense reports and timesheets? Can you automate or digitize some of that? Does some of your team spend too much time traveling to meetings? Can a remote conference call or a web meeting be used instead? Now, I do want to pause and take a minute to say that technology on its own is not a differentiator, and why is that? Unless this is proprietary technology that the company has invested in, proprietary technology that's relevant to the owner, that helps the owner or delivers a better end result to your client. Unless that's the case, that technology is available on the market to anybody. So you can't really consider that technology a differentiator. In the early days of 3D modeling and BIM, many companies were positioning themselves and their value propositions around being able to deliver BIM services in 3D modeling for better work put in place. And that's great. Except now what has happened is that those folks that want to play in that space have now caught up and adopted that technology, and that technology is no longer a differentiator. I would say that LEED accreditation is the same way in many regards. That when LEED first came out, the LEED certification first came out with U.S. Green Building Council, that if you had LEED, it was a differentiator. It set you apart from the pack. And then actually rather quickly, everyone caught on to that, so everyone became a LEED professional. And now the credential is either expected or is irrelevant. So you need to watch out with looking at these market available technologies and certifications as a differentiator, and really step back and think about whether or not that makes your company different than everyone else around them. And maybe it does for a short period of time. But if it doesn't do it for the long term, then you need to realize that it's a moving target, that you can reap the rewards of that in the short term, but you're going to need to have a plan after that to maintain your differentiation and your position in the market. So having a consistent project management process is important as you make your operations more efficient. You can see in this model that we start with a pre-job planning where we use feedback from other projects and information from earlier cycles of the process. And I know what y'all may be saying, geez, I'm looking at this model and this kind of makes sense and we do this. And the challenge is to really think about whether or not you do it. We need to incorporate short interval planning, and sometimes referred to as Agile Planning or Scrum, that allows us to react quickly as the project changes. We can communicate back and forth through daily huddles, create an internal feedback loop. We have to continue planning all the way through the project, including the exit strategy for the project, which can include finishing tasks, doing financial closeout, document closeout, and demobilization, just to name a few. But as we end the project, it's important to review the processes we use in the project. We should perform an assessment of the project team from both internal and external perspectives. We should document these assessments and specifically identify improvement areas. These improvement areas should be talked about, and a course of action needs to be taken to enhance performance. And this all feeds into operational excellence. All along the way with each project and through the year, we really should be measuring our performance and identifying trends that we might show that may show to us or highlight to us our next major area of improvement. So we want to take a moment to talk about key performance indicators. And I have to admit that I've got an entire presentation just on establishing, implementing, and measuring key performance indicators. But I think it's important to make it part of the conversation as we're sitting here talking about operational efficiency and operational excellence as a way to differentiate from the market. So KPIs are metrics that are built around improvement goals. They really are the key to achieving operational efficiency, and they go hand in hand with a culture of excellence. When we talk about KPIs, we're referring to the periodic assessment of an organization, a business unit, maybe a division, or some other entity inside the company. When you create a KPI, you're creating a stated objective or a standard, and you're attaching it to a desired goal or outcome. An effective key performance indicator is one which can be easily understood by the organization. It's seeking to achieve something that's meaningful to the success of the organization. It should be a measurable objective, and it's an objective that can be controlled or impacted by the organization or the entity. So here are some examples of KPIs. KPIs can be developed to improve back office processes, field operations, improve customer experience, and some other things. Of course, I mean, you can apply a KPI to just about any objective that you want to improve. Most of these examples are KPIs which can easily be applied to your company, depending on your strategy and your initiatives. So here's why KPIs really matter. They're going to help you formulate your goal or objective for improving a particular part of your business. The entire KPI is associated with a target, or better said, with a stated goal or a desired effect. The process allows you to measure your progress towards achieving a performance initiative. And all of this on paper allows you to communicate and focus your team on specific goals and improvement measures. So listed on these next two slides are some other major benefits of applying key performance indicators in your business. Just read through these, and if you have any questions about them, I can certainly elaborate on it later on. So here are some final thoughts on KPIs as a part of our conversation regarding operational excellence. If you decide to incorporate KPIs into your process improvement program, make sure that you only focus on what you actually are interested in improving. Otherwise, you're going to lose the interest of the group. When you incorporate a mindset of operational excellence and you implement these KPIs, you're going to experience a shift over time in culture in the organization to a culture of continuous process improvement. And people are going to be naturally inclined to always look to make the area around them better. If you allow your employees to be a part of developing this improvement program, you're going to be much more successful getting buy-in than if you roll it out as a corporate mandate. Also something to think about. As you develop goals for operational excellence and implement KPIs, you should consider incorporating these goals into the evaluations of your employees. That way you have alignment between the individual and the company. All right, so now we're getting into the content that I find most interesting because of my background. In the past, I was an owner-director of planning, design, and construction for a large hospital system. And I was the type of owner that valued good business relationships. I saw the importance of team continuity and not having to orient new teams to my program with each project. And I know that's not always the case for lots of reasons, but client relationships in construction creates trust, and it creates a network of professionals that can be considered a differentiator for you. I hope you've all seen and benefited from these types of relationships, because it means that you value your clients and you're aligned with their needs. If we were sitting one-on-one with each other, I would probably ask you how you deal with your client relations today. I'd really want to know if you've developed a business model in a culture where projects aren't one and done, where you plan for a relationship and where you can be rewarded with repeat work. I'd be interested to know if you can align and understand your clients' pressures and the constraints that they're facing and their business drivers, or if the culture is more inclined to complain about the owner, to rush to get the project over and move on. It's when you can develop a relationship with your clients where you're aligned with understanding what they're going through, what their constraints and objectives are, and what their goals are, you're going to be providing a tremendous value to your client, and one that's going to be paid back to you. And it may take time, but it's going to be paid back to you through client loyalty. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are those types of clients that put their contractors through the crucible, and they treat their contractors like third-class citizens. I personally stay away from them. But the majority of owners are simply program managers that have a set of expectations to meet, and they have stress in their work, and that causes them to approach every problem with a hammer. What we want to talk about here is building client relationships by getting to know your client. There are these buzzwords called customer intimacy and customer centricity, client for life, and they all essentially mean the same thing. They mean a business culture and a company philosophy of getting to know your clients and getting to know them so well that your clients feel like you're part of their company. It's a situation where you understand their business and you understand their actions and interests in their work. It creates a sense of team. It builds trust, and it avoids the label of vendor. It's a situation where you are so aware of the company's expectations and your client's objectives that you can offer solutions and services that are 100% value add. And I know that this is easy to say and seems difficult to do, but if you're approaching each project in a manner that you want to secure this client for life, that you want to align with this client, do the best you can for this client, and create a personal, professional relationship with this client, then I think that this is something that's attainable. I've seen it be something that's attainable. But you can't fake it, and it does have to be genuine, and it has to be developed by really knowing your clients. And I don't believe most contractors are interested to know their client's business. Maybe I shouldn't say that they're not interested. I don't believe that contractors feel like that's a natural part of the business. But what if you took time to understand the things that are listed here in this slide? What if you knew their strategic objectives so that you could better understand what drives their project decisions and what drives their schedules and what drives owner scope changes? What if you knew what their detailed service offerings were so that during a project you could recommend modifications, preferably before work is put in place, that would improve how they function in a new space? What if you knew who their competitors were and how they positioned themselves against their competitors? Could you offer tips to your client? I mean, could you keep them aware of moves their competitors are making based on information you hear through your network? Think of the value that would have to your client to know that you are in alliance with them, you're an ally of them in helping them achieve their objectives. Now, it gets difficult when you're working in an industry that's highly competitive and where it's very sensitive to be sharing information from one client to another. I don't recommend that at all. If you are working with two clients and their competitors, you need to create a clear firewall in your conversation between those two. But I'm not talking about that in this situation. I'm talking about you working for a client, and I have a healthcare background, so let's say you're working for me as a hospital client. You're working for me, and we have a project where we're thinking of bringing on a particular service, and you have heard through the grapevine that there is another medical system that's looking to fast-track a project in my competitive market that delivers the same service. That would be vital to know, and that would be vital for me to channel up through my company so that we can assess whether or not we need to move quicker and be a first mover into the market on it, or whether we want to reconsider our strategic move and instead push some other priority. This is hugely valuable to your client. So you need to know what type of market climate they're in to be able to help with this kind of a thing. You need to know if their market is growing or contracting. You need to know what their position is in their market, and how well will all of the growing and contracting of their market affect your work. Is it a leading indicator maybe for how upcoming projects may change for you? Maybe projects will be put on the back burner. Maybe projects will be fast-tracked. Maybe they're going to go through a growth spurt and they're concerned about available resources to handle the work. Another thing to ask your clients or understand about your clients is who the decision makers are. And do they know how vested and interested do those decision makers, I should say, know how vested and interested you are in being a part of their success? These are interesting questions, I think, and I think you'd say the same. Now, how much work would be required to take this approach? Again, I'm guessing not much at all. You know, maybe a little bit, of course. I mean, it's not like it's not any additional effort. But wouldn't it be personally and professionally rewarding when a relationship like this is developed? And in addition, doesn't that typically mean you're shortlisted more often? You're getting more negotiated work, and you're gaining repeat work from the client. And the great thing about taking this approach with clients is that you get a feedback loop that helps you modify your services and offer ways of doing things which are aligned with your client. It's also likely that your client's needs and the feedback received from your client are similar to other clients that you serve. So now you're building value propositions and you're identifying ways to deliver your services in a way that's more appealing to your client. And this, my friends, would be considered differentiators to your client. Okay, so it's time to start wrapping up here to leave enough room for comments and questions. My goal today was to teach or remind you of how to look at the industry in a new way so that you can determine how you can be different among your competitors by creating a competitive advantage and therefore by being differentiated. My hope is that you go forth within your company, maybe this afternoon. I would love it if it was this afternoon, or maybe tomorrow over a lunch session. The weekend hopefully doesn't let you forget what we talked about today. And start thinking about your market. Start thinking about your clients. Think about your company's strengths and think about your value propositions to identify these points of differentiation. Many, many times a company can easily create a competitive advantage and establish differentiation based on existing processes and existing capabilities in the company that simply haven't been unlocked. And that differentiation may be more on a micro scale. It may only apply to your local market. Maybe there's not a competitor in your local market that does this particular thing. But maybe if you looked at, outside of your market, maybe there are people that do that. But when you're establishing differentiation, you're trying to unlock a competitive advantage. It can be localized. It can be regionalized. Even if there are other people outside of that market that offer that type of a differentiator, that's okay, because you're maybe not focused in that market. What you want to do is you want to focus on creating differentiation in the markets that you serve. So, like I said, I hope you go forth and I hope you talk with your company and the staff in your company and you look at your existing value propositions and identify how you can create those competitive advantages. So today we discussed understanding what a commodity industry is. We discussed assessing the company to find differentiation and client relationships as a competitive advantage. I mean, I'm really happy to be speaking with you today, and it's a big thank you to Dexter and Cheney for this opportunity. I'd like to open the floor up to any questions that you guys might have, or any comments you might want to share about the presentation, ideas you have on the topic, maybe even some examples of your experience dealing with these things in your business.
All right, folks, again, this is Andy. Jay, thank you so much for the presentation. If you do have any questions or any comments, you do have that area in your GoToMeeting panel there to go ahead and type in those questions, and we'll try and get to them. Jay, just commenting real quick on the, you touched a little bit on the technology standpoint. Obviously, from my standpoint on the software side of the industry, software is great, but I'd argue that it's really how you adopt and use the different technologies and softwares that are going to give you a competitive advantage. Technology is great, but if you use it incorrectly or not to its full potential, I think you're still going to miss the mark in terms of what you want to get out of it, in terms of your bettering your business or creating a differentiation between yourself and your peers. Any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you're right on the mark. There's a couple of things that I would add, and one is you're right. So technology is necessary at this day and age to be able to do things more efficiently, accurately, more precisely. You're going to need to adopt technology tools for that, and not all technology is created equal, for sure. We know this, and it's the things all from technical support to, well, let's start with implementation, right? So what kind of support do you get from implementation, how it connects into your other business units and business processes, and into tech support, and even long-term support for the platform. But, I mean, your point is so well taken about the fact that technology does bring to it the opportunity to maybe unlock some other competitive advantages within the company. But in and of itself, the technology is not going to be your holy grail, so to speak, to all of a sudden separate you from the pack. Again, there are historical exceptions to this early on for early adopters of technology, but with that early adoption comes a lot of risk, and then of course, like I said, that early adoption is short-lived as that technology gains steam and is adopted by others. But I think it's a good point to bring up, Andy. I appreciate you saying it.
Oh, absolutely. We do have a couple questions here about whether or not the PowerPoint will be available. Jay, I believe you had wanted to give out the PowerPoint. We will, Dexter and Cheney's folks will be presenting people with the link to the recorded version of today's webinar. And for anybody that wants the recording, Jay will be following up with you as well on that. And we'll make sure we get that to you. We're not recording the PowerPoint slides. Another question here, do awards or public recognition matter to the public and or potential new clients? Are these differentiators?
That's an interesting question. So, awards or accolades, I think, come as a result of being some sort of exceptional performer in your market, right? I mean, that would be a common response. And, I'm inclined to say that the awards come as a result of already being differentiated in your market. However, they are representative of being exceptional in your market. So it's not necessarily that getting an award all of a sudden makes you different, but that getting the award is a testament to something the company is doing or the way a company is working, which is actually different or is exceptional compared to the rest. So I don't discount rewards or awards or some sort of accolade at all. I think that they are worthwhile. Now, there are certain accolades that companies can buy, right? We're not talking about those. We're talking about the type of awards that usually are given based on a clear set of standards with unbiased selection, and oftentimes they're done among a group of peers. Those awards, I think, are a testament to the accomplishments of the company, and I think should be they're marketable awards. And of course, you have to be sensitive how you do it. You don't want to come across as a company that's trying to boast or be, have bad sportsmanship, so to speak. But there's nothing wrong with showcasing some sort of accolade or award of excellence to your clients, again, as a testament to the company's ability to do something that's exceptionally better than their peers.
Certainly. Now, Jay, I think you touched on this a little bit earlier in the webinar, but a lot of companies seem to promote their people as their brand. Is this an overused or outdated approach?
Well, it's really funny because it's going to sound a bit contradictory for me to say that your people, saying that you have the best people is a misnomer, because everyone's saying that. And of course, the risk with that is that people are highly transferable on their own. They will. This industry is known for turnover. There's no doubt about that. But the tough thing with it is that the relationships, that client relationship piece, which is probably the most important part of this whole presentation in terms of separating yourself from the pack and getting on short lists and getting more negotiated work, those relationships are people-based. This is a people business. So I don't want to give the impression that people don't matter. Quite the contrary. This is a human capital business. Without people, nothing happens. So I think the takeaway would be that as you've identified key performers of the company, people that are high potentials, people that understand and can relate with the client, people that do exceptional work, these folks need to be surrounded with resources and put on a path that is attractive to them to remain in the company. And I don't mean to cherry pick who you offer certain benefits to. As a sidebar here, FMI did a pretty successful survey with the construction workforce, mainly focused on the difference between millennials and non-millennials. But what we found out here is, regardless of the generation of the workforce likes to have a clear career path. They like to be challenged with work, and they like to know that the leadership is invested in their career and will give them the tools to develop as a professional. So that's all to say, your people do matter. You need to have mechanisms in your company, policy and procedure in your company that reward these people and retain these folks by supporting their career path and by allowing them progression through the company. And that's not to say that people aren't a competitive advantage. If you could develop a company where you have low turnover rates and you have a company full of just high potential, high performing people, and those people also have deep client relationships, then certainly that would be a situation in an exceptional situation where people therefore are a differentiator for the company.
Certainly. And just with regard to that survey, if that's the same one that I'm thinking about, that we had a previous FMI presenter discuss in the previous webinar that we presented, that's a fascinating, very, very fascinating survey piece there that really does kind of break down the millennial structure versus, different generations, Generation X, the baby boomers. It was a very interesting survey there.
Yeah, I would. It's a free survey that we have on our website, and maybe through Dexter Cheney, you guys have it too. But I would really encourage the attendees today to take a look through that. It's not a hard read, it's not a long read, but it's pretty insightful. And then as you connect some dots through the survey, you start to really dispel some myths about the millennial workforce, and you really start to understand not only what's important to them, but what's important to other generations in the workforce to help them really achieve that more heightened sense of performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question here: what is the best single KPI do you recommend for a small company?
Well, the thing with KPIs is that there's all sorts of different KPIs. There's quantitative and qualitative and leading and lagging, and it somewhat depends on how well the company can shift and address and measure their KPIs. Typically, you want to focus on leading indicator KPIs because leading indicator KPIs are more predictive in nature, whereas lagging indicators are already they're basically telling you what has happened, and they develop your trend line to see if there's a behavioral pattern. So it's not necessarily a look backward because you can get future insight from lagging indicators, but it's a little bit, well, like the name implies, there's a lag between, you know, what you're measuring and when you get the insight. So I would focus on if you're a small company and you have to really be careful with how much new initiatives you roll out, or maybe there's your resource constraint to be able to measure and monitor KPIs. I would say first look at leading indicators, and from a leading indicator standpoint, you probably want to look at financial leading indicators as your initial set of indicators to look at. It's a tough question to answer because it is a broad topic, and like I said, I've got a presentation just on that alone. Whoever asked that question, yeah.
Actually, can you clarify what leading KPIs would be?
Yeah. So you want to look at things that like I said, that are like forward looking. So you may look at things like win rates on bids, for example. Things that you could, information that you could take and then make strong predictions about how the company would perform in the next one. But since we're trying to get away from bidding and more to negotiating, you may look, as a leading indicator, you may look at things like, I'm trying to think of a good one that we would use that aren't financial. Well, you could look at depending on which side of the fence you're on, you could look at customer satisfaction surveys as leading indicators, because they could be leading indicators of future work. That might be an example of a leading indicator. But I'm happy to provide more content, Andy, for you to share on KPIs, because it's a fascinating topic that I really like, that I really enjoy.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, well, we've got time for one more question here. Just in terms of client relationships, so what do you think of customer advocacy programs or initiatives?
So, just an example would have been great. Customer advocacy programs. I suppose what we're referring to here are situations where maybe the contractor is hosting or supporting some sort of special event to raise awareness for a project, perhaps, or something like this. I'm not sure if that's the intent of the question. I'm not sure if that person.
No.
Okay.
Customer advocacy programs. Well, there's a couple different things. There's either internal ones or there's external companies that actually come in and kind of create that bridge between your company and your clients and get them talking about you, get them doing reviews, get them improving your brand, generating awareness from their standpoint out there in the marketplace. So it's kind of engaging your clients, people you worked with in the past, to say good things about you or to promote you to others, spread word of mouth, network on your behalf.
Yeah, okay, thank you for clarifying. So I think the effectiveness of that is going to be based on, the history of the relationship, right? So I think that matters a lot. But I think there is a spot for it, and there's a suitable spot for it, whether it's a young relationship or a mature relationship. Number one, it helps build brand awareness, but also, again, it goes to sort of that testament piece, right? I mean, there's nothing better than when you can hear about a company through another company, and if that's facilitated through a third party, that's even better, right? Because there's no sales pitch in that. There's no concern about there being some sort of ulterior motive in that regard. So I would support them. Actually, now that I know what you're talking about, there are many companies that do this, including FMI, for example. But again, I'm not saying that they're good because we do that, but I think that there's an opportunity to have a sort of a third party there as the bridge, as you say, kind of validating or advocating on the party's behalf.
Do you think they can be used as leverage to create differentiation, I guess?
So I think it depends. When you get into those engagements, they're usually fairly targeted and specific in what you're trying to achieve. It could be a great outlet to communicate, you know, some differentiation that the company holds for sure. But in and of itself, I don't believe that it's that it provides a competitive advantage or differentiation.
Yeah, certainly, and that's more of what I meant is kind of being sort of the mouthpiece, if you will, to kind of promote yourself about the differentiation that you may have. So.
Yeah, because I think, you know, again, going to like the rewards thing, right? So like if you're doing something very well, you know, it's almost received, you know, with more credibility when it's someone talking about it for you rather than, you know, the company standing up and sort of, you know, waving their flag and stomping their feet, you know, about their accolades. So absolutely.
Perfect. Well, folks, I know we're about a minute past the top of the hour here, so I think we're going to go ahead and close this out for today. I did want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know it's always hard to, you know, take an hour away from your busy schedules for these kind of educational learning events, but it was well worth it. Jay, fascinating topic today. Great presentation. I want to thank you very much for joining us as well.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. Happy to do it again.
Absolutely. And we'll go ahead and leave the webinar up for about the next 30 seconds or so. Jay's contact information is up there if you want to write down his phone number, email, or FMI's website. And again, just a reminder, we'll follow up with folks in the next day or two, see if they want copies of the recorded version. If you want copies of the slides, please go ahead and reach out to Jay or let us know in the questions area here, and I'll make sure to send those over to Jay, and he can get those to you as well. So thanks again, folks, for joining us. Again, we'll leave this up for about another 20 or 30 more seconds.